In April 2021, I wrote my elementary PE teacher, Mr. Heggen, a thank you letter. Dear Mr. Heggen, this letter has been percolating in my mind for a while now. I guess it's time to put my thoughts down on paper. The older I get, the more I find myself reflecting back to my childhood. I look back fondly, growing up in that small town, riding my bike all over, playing with all the other kids in town. Those were good times. Grade school, of course, played a big role, including all my teachers. I loved school, but most of all, I loved PE, which brings me to the point of this letter. I want to thank you. You were a great PE teacher, but you were so much more than that. It's the type of male PE teacher you were. I feel so lucky and have immense gratitude that you always let me play with and compete against the boys. I don't ever remember you making me feel like I was less than because I was a girl. All of us girls who had you as a PE teacher benefited from that. I'm not even sure you realize how awesome that was, how ahead of the times that was, how it helped shape my personal identity and belief in myself. A lot of girls around the nation and globe get a different message, and that really makes me sad. I think most people wonder if what they did in life ever made a difference. I'm here for an answer for you. Yes, you did. After the letter to Mr. Heggen, I wanted to explore this more. I grew up a tomboy in a small farming community in the 80s and 90s. It was untouched by the current ideologies around gender and sexuality. It was a time and place where I was free to play and explore the masculine side of my personality, while the feminine side was equally reinforced with healthy boundaries. I sat down with my dad to discuss specific moments of parenting me through those years, from his perspective and mine. The interview is divided into several topics, each segment lasting approximately 10 minutes. We discussed several categories. Today, I invited you here to talk about growing up, and
which is still happening.
Yeah. Which I've been reflecting about a lot lately, because I think about what's going on in society with gender and messages that are being portrayed to kids, probably especially. And it just got me thinking about when I was growing up and what it was like for me, and how, now that I'm older and have my own kids, thinking about how you and Mom handled that. And I wanted to talk about certain scenarios from my perspective, what I remember, and get your feedback on what you guys were thinking during the same scenarios. So I also think it's important to pause here and just talk about why Mom's not with us.
Sure.
So she passed away of ovarian cancer 22 years ago, and it would be good if she was here, because then we could have her perspective too, but you'll have to represent her. And we'll do the best we can.
That's a tough assignment.
Yeah. So, it's just really, I feel really grateful, basically. And I'm really scared. I feel fear for some of the kids out there that could be being raised by different parents who have different beliefs, and then the message in general from culture. Because I think if I was raised in today's world by very liberal parents, I could have been encouraged to do things that would have changed me forever in a worse way. But as you know, I was a very strong tomboy, but I also, that part of me got validated, but also the biology of who I was validated at the same time.
Yes,
and
that's true.
That allowed me to mature into somebody that embraced both sides of me in a very healthy way. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, just how you guys parented me through that.
Okay.
Okay, so what do you have to say to all of that?
Well, Jackie, I understand your concern for the young, and I too share concern for the young, probably in a somewhat different manner, but I would like to say about your mother, and she's a very big part of this. Your mother, I think, was somewhat of a tomboy herself. So I think she had an acute awareness, me being a boy my whole life and only having brothers, never having had a full-blooded sister. I had stepsisters when I was younger, but I was raised by a single mother and who was a strong woman. And my grandmother was a very strong woman. So raised in their home, but your mother had a strong dad, a very strong dad, but she had a very soft and warm and cuddly mother. But she lost her brother when she was only 5 years old in a tragic accident. And I think she tried to fill the void for her dad. And so she loved horseback riding. She loved to wear cowboy clothes and guns and played with the boys when she was young. So she exhibited many of the characteristics that you're talking about for yourself. So I think that between the two of us, me being very masculine focused and she being very feminine in her adulthood, but very much loved to play male games when she was young and loved a strong man, I think that she understood the balance of both. So I too wish she was here so she could offer her perspective.
So one of the first things I remember is just playing. Like, I loved boy toys. He-Man and G.I. Joe, Matchbox cars. I just always remember gravitating to that kind of toys. And you guys always got them for me. They were always around to play with. I don't ever remember any time I asked for a toy that I was told no. And I was free to play with them. And I had sisters, so I remember playing with girl toys too because they were around and enjoying them. But was there any discussion for you guys on what I was allowed to play with or what you bought me? Or was it just that's what she liked and that's what we got her?
I don't recall your mother and I discussing specifically whether it was a boy toy or a girl toy. I think it's important that you understand that we were in agreement about our daughters. We felt that each one that came along was a unique and special individual that had desires and feelings that might not mirror the other child. But we never tried to create or develop mirror images. We wanted each one of our daughters to be unique and special in their own way. So as long as it was not something that we felt was inappropriate somehow or harmful to you, and I'm speaking more physically than anything else, we were all for it. So we just tried to provide as much of what each girl wanted that was unique and special to them. So I don't really recall your mother and I having any specific discussion about toys.
Okay. Do you remember what age you saw that I started to manifest that proclivity?
Well,
Like
yeah,
how
I
young
would
it
say
was?
that in that regard, if I reflect back, first of all, I don't think, and I wish that Chris was here so she could tell her side of it, but from my perspective, I never really thought like that. I was just really happy to see you playing. And you like to play outside, which I grew up outside, so I wanted to be outside. And a lot of your activities involved physical things. And yes, they were somewhat aggressive, but I'm somewhat aggressive. So to me, it was just kind of natural. It was okay. And I didn't think of it in terms of being boy-girl, because we all go through phases in our lives of somewhat flowing in and out of male or female kind of traits.
Yeah.
And I think that's natural. So I didn't really think of you as being different in that sense of the word.
Yeah. And I think I played a lot with the boundaries of that. Like, I think it's important to say I wasn't just playing with boy toys and liked boy clothes and all of that stuff. Like, I really wanted to be a boy. Like, once I got older, it was was not that I was confused, that I thought I was a boy or should have been a boy. I just thought they had more fun. And so I really gravitated to the activities and to hanging out with them.
Okay, well, I'm not sure your mom or I reflected on that, and is Jackie desirous to be other than what she was born.
Yeah.
I think that we just recognize that in your case, you had the physical capabilities at a very early age to run with the boys, so to speak.
Yeah.
You didn't have to be a boy to be able to run with them. And in many instances, I can think of many instances where you could outperform them at an early age, which is not completely unique. A lot of girls develop quicker than the boys do, and especially physically, and so, and also intellectually. Girls develop quicker than boys do. So, you know, I felt that your mother was a strong woman in many ways, and so I was used to that. My mother was a strong woman. My grandmother was a strong woman. So strong women and women that kind of were used to running the show and kind of acting like a man, I was used to. So I didn't question that in you.
Yeah, and I think that's part what scares me about the culture today is because I never got the message. There was no message that you could be a boy.
No.
And I think that's really scary right now because kids could be exposed to the idea that you aren't supposed to be what your biology is. And I never had to contend with that, and I'm so grateful because I think that would have been extremely confusing. So just the fact that it was absent, it wasn't even on the table, was really healthy.
Well, Jackie, if we think back 40 years, a little more than that for you when you were small, to be quite honest, the technology to do what they do today didn't really exist yet. So there wasn't really much discussion of that kind of thing.
Right.
I think it's also important, though, to recognize that not only did the technology not exist, people didn't think like that.
Right.
You were what you are when,
Yeah.
and that's how it was. We've evolved as a society to questioning things that are pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's pretty obvious is that we all go through confusing periods in our life, whether it's our sexuality or whether it's, do I want to be an executive or do I want to be a worker? I mean, it's just constant. Those things are just part of being human.
Yeah.
And now we give far too much credence to things that aren't really normal.
Yeah, and I think that because it didn't exist, it was maybe easier to let me play in that realm without being scared.
I was never afraid.
Yeah. I think there might be other parents out there or people in today's world who could be, just because that does seem to be on the table and it's something they have to contend with and think about, knowing that their kids are being exposed to that. I mean, there was a period of time after Top Gun came out where I called myself Maverick. Like,
Right.
I wanted to be called the male hero of the
Right.
story, and we would pretend play Goose and Maverick on the swing set. And you guys let me do that. Like, I remember it was totally okay to, I want to be called Maverick, and sign my name Maverick, and nobody made me feel bad or weird about it.
Right.
But it was a phase. Like, I played with it, and then I grew out of it.
Right. Yep. And that's pretty normal, actually.
Yeah. But I just think with things on the table now and messages being out there, it's like, oh no, does she really think she should be a boy, and should I encourage that? Whereas you guys, it was just like she's playing, and that's part of growing up.
It just popped into my mind that if your mother was here, I think she would say, well, Jackie, when I was young, like you, there was a program on television called Sky King, and it featured a man who flew his own plane all over and did different things, heroic things and that. And I wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And he was a male. And at that time, there were no female pilots. Now we have female pilots that pilot commercial airlines. So things have evolved over the years in different ways that probably would have made it more of a challenge for us, I think, today, raising children.
Yeah.
But I suspect that your mother and I, because of who we were and who we were raised by, that we would have handled it much as we did in the 1970s and 80s. I don't think we would have been different just because culture has changed. So I share your concern, but I also believe that because of how and where we were raised and by whom we were raised, it was not really that big a challenge for us to deal with what might seem to you like a big issue. It really was not.
Yeah, I think that's the most surprising thing, is just that it was, looking back, it was a non-issue.
Yes.
And what a blessing that was.
Yes. And healthy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
I grew up in a small town, and
Yes.
back then you had a lot of freedom to play out in the streets and in the playground, and of course you just played with who was available at the time. You were around who can play, and so I played with both boys and girls, but
Right.
I generally wanted to play with the boys, and Tama and Ryan and Jimmy and Josh, and those were my go-tos. And were you guys okay with that? Was there ever?
Well, I was okay with it because actually I was kind of proud of it, Jackie, because I remember one incident in particular. One of the boys came over and we were throwing a football around, your sisters and I, and we played a lot of sports, of course, and you girls were always interested in sports. And he ran, I saw him coming at a dead run, and he caught a pass that was intended for you. And when he caught it, he said tauntingly, "Ha ha, I got the football now, and they're not getting it back." And as he's saying that, I could see you closing the gap on him because you could run faster than he could. And you tackled him and ripped the ball away from him, and he went home immediately. He left. So all I felt out of that was a great sense of pride.
Yeah. Well, this one might not be so prideful, and I don't even know if you know about it, but Brian and Tama had a club, and it was a boys' club, and to join it you had to pee into a milk jug standing up, and of course I did it, and Angie refused to do it, and I always made fun of her for that because she wouldn't do that. But did you know about that kind of stuff?
I did not.
Yeah.
No, and had I known, I'm sure that I would have said something to the effect of, "Jackie, what were you thinking?"
Yeah, not appropriate.
That's not really appropriate.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have taken it to some ridiculous level because it didn't deserve that. It's just, children do things.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
Yep. I still tease her to this day that she doesn't. She wasn't part of our club.
And I guess I'm not surprised that Angie wouldn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. And that just goes to the differences, I think.
Yes, that just speaks to the individuality. And it didn't make it right or wrong that she wouldn't, it's just who she is.
Yeah. And I think that just points to my desire of, like, I can hang with the boys.
Yes.
Like, you can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, and I have to say that, Jackie, in fairness to you, having that thought at an early age, I believe was a reflection of your mother and father, because we always tried to let you girls know that you could accomplish or do anything you chose to do. It wasn't about male, female, it's about your desire and abilities, so.
Yeah. And at the same time, though, somehow I believe that men have strengths that women don't, and women have strengths that men don't, and that's a good thing. That's actually okay. Like, I never thought they were equal in everything, nor that should they be. Like you said, I appreciate strong men, and I appreciate strong women and the differences that they have. It's not like we have to eliminate those.
Well, I know that you would prefer not to get into a morality kind of a discussion, but I grew up and still believe at the age of 75 that men are men and women are women. Mm-hmm. That does not put boundaries around either one of them, but it does mean they have certain skills and they have a certain status in society. We have blurred those lines terribly in my lifetime, and it's not been a positive thing for our
Right.
society.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and that's what's so important to me about this conversation is that ultimately I want to communicate that I got to maximize the female side and the masculine side without eliminating that those two different things exist, and
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
And I'm glad that you got that message, because that's how we lived our lives.
Yeah. And I had another influential, positive male role model in my life at the time, which I, again, extremely grateful for, and that was Mr. Heggen.
Mhm.
And he was the PE teacher. And we lived in a really small community, so he taught at a couple of different schools. But what I remember about Mr. Heggen is that he also encouraged not just me, but girls who were athletic. Like, he genuinely seemed to enjoy letting the girls compete with the boys, and he encouraged that
He did.
a lot. And he would let the girls who wanted to, he would ask them if he thought they were athletic enough, if they wanted to play on the boys' teams. And he was also, he didn't force it. He let the girl make the choice, and I know not all the girls took him up on that. What do you think about Mr. Heggen, and did you
Well,
guys talk about that?
Oh, yes. John came to me on several different occasions, naturally, because Teresa, you, and Angie all followed each other through school. And all three of you ended up playing with the boys, not competing necessarily against them, boy-girl, but competing on the same level. And John came to me and asked if I was okay with that, and I said, of course I am. And he said, well, your girls are athletic enough and aggressive enough to compete without getting injured. And he said, that's important to me.
Yeah.
He said, and I actually enjoy watching them, in his words, kick the boys' butts.
Yeah.
So yes, we had that discussion.
And somebody asked me once if I was ever bullied or made fun of for being such a tomboy, and I said no, and I think part of it is just because of the community and the time we grew up in, that like at school, even Mr. Heggen encouraged that it was okay, and I think kids got that message. So I'm grateful for Mr. Heggen.
Well, yeah, and I am too, because I think John never looked at it as specifically boy versus girl. It was more, he's very big into exercise. He's somebody that rides his bicycle incessantly around town. So he just appreciated young women that were athletic and aggressive physically.
And at the same time, and I think this theme keeps coming up again, that it's okay to have both. Like, there was freedom to play with the boys, and then at certain times, like square dance, there was no confusion. It
Right.
was boy-girl. And
Right.
so, again, I think both that freedom and the boundaries is what creates healthy
Right.
people.
Exactly.
Yeah. When it came to my clothes, that's another place that upon reflection, I see both freedom and boundaries. Because when I was playing, I was very much open to pick what I got to wear, which was always boys' clothes and bowls and stuff like that. But when it came time to formal events, it was that I dressed like a girl,
Yes.
like church and other activities. And so I think that's another place that you allowed me to play and express myself, but then there was also a boundary. Was
Yes.
that something that you guys, do you remember, again, talking about, or just, that's
Well-
just what it was?
Well, my answer to that, Jackie, is that I work a lot of hours. And when your mother was alive, she spent a lot of time with you girls because she taught at the school where you were going to school. So she was aware of your daily activities if she wasn't teaching you directly. And I was at work a lot. And she took care of those kinds of things, both for you and for me. She purchased most of my clothing, if not all. And she kept tabs on what was going on with your clothing. So I do not recall us having a discussion about, well, Jackie wants to wear basically boy clothing.
Yeah, like a
Or
tux.
reflective of a male kind of a thing. It was more just, she just tried to give you what you wanted, because that's what we tried to do.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that thought process, are we messing up her psychic in terms of who she's gonna be?
Yeah.
We didn't have that kind of thinking going on at that time. Because it was pretty normal. You have to understand that we were old enough to have grown up with people who came from pretty rough backgrounds. And so, and a lot of the backgrounds were rural in those days. A lot of America was rural, agricultural, and a lot of farm girls, and they grew up wearing bib overalls and things like that. So, and doing very much male-oriented kind of things. So they were strong women, but yet they were women.
Yeah.
And so I think nowadays that part of what is happening is that there's a thought process that if somebody is female, that somehow makes them weak. I don't look at it that way, and neither did your mother. Women were strong in their own way.
Yeah. And this is one of the areas where I said you guys drew a boundary, but also a lot of freedom. I mean, I was allowed to play in swim trunks. Like
Yes.
I got to run around without my shirt off for a long time. But
Yep.
then when I started to develop physically, that's when it was not appropriate anymore.
Well, I do remember your mother saying to me at one point, Jackie's gonna have to start wearing different stuff because she can't continue to go without a shirt,
Yeah.
you know.
And I remember one of the specific times when she was like, you have to go put a shirt on.
Yeah,
And I wasn't happy with it, but she kind of explained, like, things are happening and
yeah,
you're changing and you can't do that anymore.
right. So we did have that, but it wasn't an in-depth kind of a discussion. It was just a matter of fact. Jackie's changing, so she's gonna have to start wearing different clothing.
Yeah, and I developed late, so it was pretty late.
Yeah.
But I got to dress up as Rambo, like during Halloween and
Yeah.
stuff again, you know.
Yeah,
And one of the other things when it came to, there was a couple of other points of contention. It wasn't all just rainbows and unicorns. I really wanted to cut my hair. I don't know if you knew that or if that was a battle that Mom and I fought.
that was a battle you and your mother fought.
Yeah, I begged and pleaded to have my hair cut like a boy, and that was just one thing that she didn't allow. And back then I didn't like it, but now I think it was a really good choice. Because I think if you start to alter your body, which is where we are now, that's harder to back out of. And so that was a part of femininity that I hung on to forever. Obviously, I have super long hair. So. That became a source, I think, of feminine pride, was my hair.
Yes.
Which is funny, because that was one of the things I wanted to change so badly. And the other point was, this is one of the only times I remember Mom actually getting mad at me. And that was at school. I drew a penis on my jeans, and she got very upset. And I don't remember the words, I just remember that was bad. And did she talk to you about that?
She never mentioned that to me because she knew that there were some things that I would probably likely overreact to.
Yeah.
And so your mother had a tendency to want to sort of, this may sound wrong, but protect you girls from me.
All moms do.
And so I'm sure that was something that she kept from me. And with regards to your hair, she would have known that I would have been dead set against you cutting your hair like a boy.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I value is the beauty of a female, and part of that beauty is hair. Now, when I see a short-haired woman, I don't immediately assume that she's a male-oriented person. She may have reasons that she has to have short hair. But I do appreciate how the Lord gave women certain characteristics that men don't have normally.
Yeah.
So I don't recall her discussing that with me, but she didn't need to. She knew how I felt.
Yeah, and it's not a comfortable thing to talk about, but again, I want to be honest with how boyish I was, because I think that's part of this story, is that I really was, and yet I turned in to being able to have both sides.
Yes.
So.
Well, it's not a surprise to me to hear all that, Jackie, because to be honest, I would brag that my daughter can do all the things that boys can do and mostly better.
Yeah.
So I took a certain amount of pride in that. I also said at one point to your mother when she was still alive, I said, do not be too surprised if Jackie goes in the Marine Corps. And her comment was, well, I hope not, but she would make a good Marine.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I did the next best thing and married one.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yes, you did. And he is a good Marine, so.
Yep, raised by one and married one.
That's
so.
right. That's just a good career
About
path.
as good as you can get without being one yourself.
That's right.
Speaking of women in general, you've talked a lot about strong women, and that was a message that I got overtly. Both you and Mom were very complimentary of the female, just intellectually, spiritually, physically, and their capability. So I think setting that stage, that women, to be a woman is a good thing, just that was the general message. I mean, Mom was always, she was a school teacher, she always talked about how girls academically were either as smarter than boys or just as capable. That was big for her. So I got that message intellectually from her, and of course you, but I think I put more weight into what she said about that. And then physically, from you, not just the beauty of women, which I think people underestimate today or want to stop talking about.
Right.
Which again is one of those, like, it's obvious. People value beautiful women. It's a thing that we should take pride in, or that's part of what's great about being a woman, I think, is the beautiful side of it. And yet, beautiful but not fragile, physically capable.
Right.
So, where do you think you got that message as a man? That, like, why do you have that?
Well, that one to me, I think, is fairly simple. And I say simple, my initial statement will sound contradictory to that, but as a young man being raised by a strong mother, single mother, and a strong grandmother, who was also a single parent who raised two children, a boy and a girl, I was always very much attracted to women, to girls in general, but scared to death of them as a young man. They scared me. But once I went to the Marine Corps, and once I had a sense of self-worth myself, as a man, as a Marine, I began to recognize the beauty of the difference between males and females. And not just the physical beauty, that's obvious to the eyeball. But there's beauty in women that I find that as I got older and more mature, and once I married your mother, who taught me a whole lot about not just her physical beauty, but what made her beautiful inside. That made me realize that women have capabilities men don't have. And the real capability in that to me is two things: the ability to give life, which men cannot do, ever, and the fact that women can, for the most part, do whatever a man can do. Now, of course, there's limitations in terms of just physical strength, and that's meant to be, and that's something we don't value enough in our society today, is those differences. So, to me, God intended for there to be men and women, and they're not supposed to cloud the lines as to who does what and when and how. And that's why we have so many problems today. We have too many people that don't know who they are and why they are, and yet they're still male and female.
Yeah.
They're not some pronoun or whatever they want to say. So for your mother and I, we grew up troubled like anybody because we had difficulties in our families like all families do. But we had good parents who taught us the difference between right and wrong and inspired in us the ability that through work and dedication and a little bit of luck, you can pretty much accomplish whatever you want. So we tried to raise our own daughters in that fashion. It didn't mean that we didn't ever butt heads, because we did. Sometimes we agreed to disagree, but for the most part, when it came to you girls, we always came to some sort of an agreement. And it didn't really have much to do with gender. It had to do with just being good people. So that's pretty much how it was.
Yeah. So a big piece of this is the sexuality part of this that I think is happening today, the sexualization, I should say, of it, which wasn't there for me in my memory. I don't remember that being, for one, just there wasn't a lot of messages aimed at kids sexually like I think there is now. And this is one of the areas that I feel, again, grateful for, because I think as a girl growing up, exhibiting masculine characteristics, one, it wasn't sexualized. It didn't mean that I was going to be gay. And two, it was always positively enforced. Like being a leader, being athletic was a good thing. So I feel very bad for boys even back then and today that if they display any feminine characteristics as a young person, one, it's sexualized, it means they're going to be gay, and two, it seems to be shamed a lot. Like a boy can't exhibit female characteristics and it be okay. So I don't really know what I want to talk about with this, but it makes me grateful and sad.
Well, I would say there are many factors that have led us to this, but in my world, and this is true since I was a child, there are two forces at work. There's the godly force, which is love, and there's a satanic force, which is division. And what I see happening far too often today is division. And you can call that over sexuality or whatever, but it's in everything. It's in religion, it's in politics, it's in school, it's in daily life. And one of the reasons it's so prevalent, I believe, is because of social media. We did not have that in the time when you were a child. We didn't have it in my lifetime, of course, as a child. So that's only been in the last 20 years that we've been plagued with that. But we've sure deteriorated as a society in 20 years, and it's largely responsible, or goes back to the responsibility of social media. Yeah. There's just too much discussion that gets a lot of attention from those that are what I call fringe players. And so everybody has a right to their opinion, but it doesn't mean I want their opinion. And we get it whether we want it or not. And then you have to sort that out. Yeah. So a lot of people aren't, for whatever reason, they don't seem to be capable of sorting it out and moving on. So we need, the key there is mankind has always needed strong leadership, and right now we don't have strong leadership at hardly any level. So, and that includes the churches. The churches aren't doing their job either, so that's sad.
So when it came to me specifically back then, was that part of a fear or discussion?
Never.
Never?
Never. Your mom and I we never ever had that fear or that thought process. And to be honest, your mother and I never felt that way about, we never looked at anybody, whether they had female or male characteristics, and said, well, I wonder if that person's gonna end up being gay. It's not how we thought. It wasn't a big deal. It did happen, but part of the reason that it wasn't a big deal is because those that were of that disposition weren't trying to make it the normal thought process. And that's what's happening today. They're trying to normalize behavior that's not actually normal. It's real, but it doesn't make it normal. And so trying to turn these things that are real into normal is a real problem. Because some people can't just say, okay, they are, but that doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they are, and we need to move on.
I remember two things. None of these, I didn't have any stereotypes or anything about that until much later in college, playing softball.
Right.
The college player. That's when the stereotypes, that's really the only time I started to hear any kind of thing like that. And by that time I was fully developed.
Right.
Yeah, mostly. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah. And so I was already secure in myself,
Yes.
who I was. And so it was a lot easier to not be affected by it, not
Right.
question myself.
Right.
Whereas if I think I would have got those messages in kindergarten, first grade, second, my entire developmental life, like, geez, no wonder so many people are struggling so badly as teens with who they are and what they are, and is that okay? And I just didn't have to deal with that.
Right, and Jackie, when you say that, if you listen to yourself, you realize that I said confusion,
Yeah.
division. That's what's going on. We're being divided and we're being conquered when we don't need to be. It's not necessary, it's foolish, and we need to stop that nonsense.
Yeah.
It's just, we need to just recognize that we love people because they are people, and that we don't have to agree with whatever they might be doing, their behavior or whatever, but it doesn't make them bad. It just means that they're different.
Yeah, and I
So-
know I got that message because I think I was about a senior in high school, and I remember there was a girl on another opposing team, and somehow I got the idea, or it was communicated to me, that she liked me in that way, in a sexual way, and I was very disturbed by it. And I remember kind of being nasty about it, talking to Mom about it, and I was just like, ew, and I don't remember the words, but I remember the feelings. And Mom's response was surprising to me in the sense that she was compassionate.
Yeah, compassionate. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say to you, is that she didn't look down her nose at that young lady because she had that disposition. She recognized that for whatever reason, that child was confused about her own sexuality, but that didn't make her a bad person.
Yeah.
The only time it becomes bad is when we try to turn it into something other than. And thank goodness, like I said, your mother and I didn't have to have very many discussions about some of these topics because basically we were on the same page.
Yeah.
So she didn't have to consult me to know what the right thing to say to you was. If we somehow had a disagreement about something, then we would discuss that, of course, and come to some sort of an agreement. But for the most part, I was blessed to have a mate who had pretty much the same kind of thought processes that I had, and vice versa. And she was very much a female, and I was very much a male. And that's a good balance.
Yeah.
That's a really good balance.
Why do you think that upset me so much?
The fact that she had compassion,
Yeah.
because nowadays we don't have compassion, we have anger. We have anger, we have fear, we have aggression, and what your mother showed was love. We don't have enough love in today's world. It's all about getting on top of something and controlling And the reality is we're more out of control than we've ever been.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that your mother, who you know was a unique and special and strong woman in her own way, had compassion for somebody who didn't have her life under control at that point.
Yeah.
So you just don't get to see a lot of that nowadays, Jackie, unfortunately. There aren't many women like your mother.
No. I remember Angie has a similar story about Mom. I don't know the details, but it's about, she also was being negative about somebody. I don't remember what the story is, but she said Mom said to her, everybody is a child of God.
Exactly. Yep. And see, that's the thing that that troubles me the most about what's going on is that you mentioned Rambo. I'm going to throw in something here because it's been my feeling forever. I loved the movie Rambo. I loved the character Rambo. At the same time, my own personal Rambo is Jesus, because he had more strengths than any man has ever displayed, and yet if I break him down, he's more feminine than he is masculine.
Yeah. Wow.
So he is my ultimate Rambo. And don't you find it ironic that he has more feminine characteristics historically than he has male? But there's never been a stronger male,
Yeah.
ever. So, and he had compassion for all.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So it's what we need. It would help our children if we were teaching them about the real Rambo. And you were a little Rambo.
I certainly had the knife.
Yeah, so, yeah.
I loved that knife.
Well, I was glad you had
I
it.
wish I still had it.
They probably don't even make it anymore, Jackie.
No, and if they did, I don't know if they'd get to sell it. A lot of what we've been focusing on is my elementary age.
Yes.
And I think those were key developmental areas, but I did grow up and get
Yes.
older.
Yes, you did. And me too.
And and so I've been reflecting about how it played out, how it changed from that tomboy to who I am today. And I still have a lot of masculine characteristics in my
Yes.
personality, but on the outside I look very feminine. I dress very feminine. I keep my hair and makeup very feminine. So there was certainly a transition from childhood
Right.
to adulthood, and it was not a struggle, I would say, for me, because I think of the way that you guys parented in my elementary years, where a lot of the boy got to be in playtime, and then a lot of the feminine was reserved for formal events, and then that I wasn't allowed to change my appearance, like with my hair. So there was no backing out or permanent bodily things that had to be undone or anything like that. The development of my physicalness just happened naturally, and then going from less playtime to more formal time just happens naturally. So I think there was wisdom in how you guys, and I don't know, that maybe that wasn't intentional, but it's how it played out. And I think that set it up to just be a transition. So upon reflection, what do you think of that?
Well, Jackie, I think you've done a good job of stating how that transition occurred. The thing that comes into my mind as I listen to you is that maturity. When we're young, we have a tendency to think, I know everything, because we'll argue with our parents about, well, others get to do this, I should be able to do this, when we don't really know what's best for us. That's where parents come into play. Parents are supposed to know what's ultimately best for us. But I think good parenting also allows flexibility, where you are allowed to develop at a rate that's comfortable for you. And that's not always easily recognizable. So I've often said to people, and I've been asked many times, how do you get daughters like you have? I tell them it's by the grace of God, and then it's through loving unconditionally, and then you have to be smarter than they are. And then I always add, good luck with that. And when people laugh at me when I say you have to be smarter than they are and good luck with that, I know that they've already failed. Because children are way smarter than we give them credit for. But as we are, as adults, because often we as adults are also confused by things in life, and we learn from circumstances or whatever, experiences, that's called wisdom. That comes with age. You can't get that in a textbook. It comes with time. And so what I've seen is just a young person that was full of vim and vigor, and that maybe wanted to be more than what she thought she was, but ultimately you realize that I have strengths that they don't possess, they being the boys.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't ever have what I have. I can have some of what they have. I can run faster, jump higher, I can do things that they can do, maybe not pee in a milk bottle, but I can, not without peeing all over everything.
Sure was a mess.
But I can do many of the things they do,
Yeah.
but they can't do certain things that I can do. And you recognize that being born a girl was not a bad thing. And so I think our young people today need to recognize that. You were born what you were because that's who the Lord wanted you to be. And the fact that you may be confused by that is more about you than about reality. So just relax, sit back, learn, and grow.
Yeah. One of the things that was a struggle for me getting older that I didn't realize at the time until looking back was that I was so accepted by my family and my small community for the quirks that I had, that when I went out into the larger workforce and the world, I wasn't aware, I think, of how lucky I was and unique in that, and that I had a lot of these. I was not traditionally female in my personality, and other people expected, based on how I looked, that I wouldn't have had the masculine. And so socially it was a little awkward, just because I was naive in that. And I don't think that's unique to me. Everybody has physical characteristics that they're judged on that don't match who they are on the inside.
Right.
So that part took a while to figure out, that people were judging me based on how I looked, and that could cause some problems.
Yeah, and I don't know how your mother and I could have done it differently to help in that regard, Jackie. I think, when I think about it, I think your mother, when she went away to college, had some experiences that she didn't have when she grew up in the same town you grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on a farm, on a livestock farm, basically, most of my life, although I lived in a small town too when I was real young. But I, being a male and always a male, never really had female characteristics as such. I didn't really become the man that I am until I went in the Marine Corps and I met your mother. Those two things, I have told many people, those two incidents in my life shaped who I am today. Mm-hmm. Of course, my childhood had an influence, much different than yours. Mine was much different than yours. But I didn't become who I am until I had experience in the Marine Corps and your mother. Those two elements of my life molded who I am today. So I'm grateful for that. And it's just part of naturally growing up and becoming wiser.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that we have to learn some things, I call it the hard way.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no other way to do it.
Sometimes, no. Yeah. It's just if I think about where the struggle was, it was much later in life, and it was much on a larger context with people. But because of how I was raised, I had a confidence and a security to be able to recognize it eventually and then adapt. And
Right.
Yeah, it was it was okay. It was hard sometimes and confusing, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes hard is okay.
I often tell people when they ask me about, my daughters and how I got them, I tell them it was by the grace of God, and I really mean that. And I always tell them that I am grateful that they are who they are, and they're all uniquely different and special in their own individual ways. And I'm thankful for that. And that's a product of the Lord, their mother, and myself. It's a blend.
Yeah.
So,
So talking about society more at large and then my small community, did you guys ever have people doubt you or question you about my behaviors and how you guys were parenting me through that?
well, of course I can't speak to your mom for that because she was in a small school system and worked with some strong-willed people. They may or may not have said things about not just you, but your sisters or whatever. If they did, I was not made aware of that. She handled it on her own. And for myself, I'm not a guy that people approach very easely, Jackie. I have the kind of personality that's pretty, I don't know how to describe it except that I know what I know, and I'm pretty firm about that, and I'm not a mealy-mouthed person. So some people are intimidated by that, and I guess they choose not to confront me as a result. So the answer to your question is no, I never really dealt with that.
No, okay. I don't know if I'm surprised or not.
I'm not surprised, I'll tell you that. I am a little disappointed that people think they cannot approach me because they can, but I'm not easily swayed.
Yeah.
It takes a really good argument to change my mind, because I spend a lot of time coming to the conclusions I have. I don't do that just a drop of a hat, and I'm not easily swayed. So it is what it is.
It is. Wrapping this up, I just want to revisit some highlights in general about some of the things that I thought went right that you
Okay.
guys did that allowed me to mature into somebody who accepted who I was biologically with really no struggle,
Right.
and was also free to express the other side of that, the masculine side of that. So I think the first thing is that you allowed me a lot of freedom in my playtime. And at the same time, when you said no, it was very little, but they were hard no's, and they were in very select situations that,
Yes.
because of those, they allowed me to transition from childhood to adulthood in a very smooth way, just because I played less and life became more formal. The third thing is you talked very positively about women just in general, like it was something, a gender that I would, or a sexuality or biology or whatever you want to call it, that I would aspire to be. Like it was a good thing to be a woman.
Right.
The fourth thing was it wasn't about my sexuality. Like that was never confused with my personality.
Right.
And then I also had other people outside my immediate family that validated that piece too. I was fortunate to grow up in a time and a place where there was other people, like Mr. Heggen, who validated it. And then the culture at large was not sending out confusing messages. So, looking back, those 5 pillars, I'm just super grateful for.
Well, I would just say, you're welcome. And I think that's a really good assessment of the time, the place, and the person. Of course, I'm very grateful for a wife and a mother who had the wisdom to know when to say yes and when to say no, and that also allowed me to have input when it was appropriate. Because I had no knowledge of how to interact with the young girls, because I didn't even have sisters growing up as a kid. So I had stepsisters, but that was a little bit different in my mind. It might not have been different, but I had a lot of experience with my brothers, my two younger brothers, but I did not have experience with young girls. So I just knew that I wanted my daughters to be treated equally and fair, not because of their gender, but because they were unique and special human beings, and that they would just grow up to be special young women, and you guys all have. And I'm sure that your sisters, although they've never talked about these issues, I'm sure that they had struggles of some sort, which they've just never shared with me. But I'm just grateful for who you all are, and you're all unique and special young women, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. And
So,
because I know this is a big part that you've touched on, but we haven't talked about, but I would like to conclude with it, just because I think it played so much into who you and Mom were, was just your beliefs, your fundamental core beliefs
yes.
about good and evil, men and women, and that. So if you could just, I don't know, wrap this up somehow with that, how that was your foundation, and you, I know you prayed for us a lot. We haven't talked about that piece.
Yeah, I guess I look at your mom and I, we both had kind of a rough childhood. It was not smooth sailing for us, either one of us. And neither one of us came from affluence. Your mother probably had a little bit better young adulthood or young childhood in terms of what was available to her. Partly because she was an only child eventually, and the fact that her dad worked hard. But her mother was a stay-at-home mom, and who never even had a driver's license clear up until she passed away. So there were some difficulties in that environment. My mother raised 3 boys on very limited income and worked really hard, and married a man who had limited education, who also had children, so it became a him, hers, and ours environment. And so I saw a lot of different things in my youth, things that I did not want to repeat if I could help it. Not that they were bad, it's just it's not what I wanted for my own children. So your mother and I both had faith, which is really important. I think we knew who we were at a fairly early age, once we had enough life experience. And we grew together, and we grew as a family, and most importantly, I felt, we both focused on the well-being of our daughters. And we didn't look at them as the weaker of the sex. We didn't see that at all. All we knew is that we were blessed with healthy children. And if we did our part and expected just that the girls would work hard and be good people, that it would turn out well. And I believe that faith and self-awareness are huge in those areas of raising children. So I'm grateful to the Lord for your mother. I'm grateful to the Lord for all of you girls and how special you've been. And I'm grateful for the fact that I'm a man who knows he's a man. So, and I will say this again, I've said it many times, the Lord knows I love women, so he surrounded me with them. And your mother had friends who felt sorry for me, and I love to quote what she said to them. Don't feel sorry for him. He's still got us outnumbered.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it was, Jackie. That's it in a nutshell.
Well, I'm glad that's the way it was. So, thank you.
Love you, Jackie.
Love you, Dad.